Hello everybody, welcome back to our chemistry board practical session 2021. Today we would be talking about our inorganic salt analysis, which comes as question number 3 in our board paper. Now, whenever we get an inorganic salt, we are aware that the salt consists of a cation and an anion. So this estimation of cation and anion is what we've been asked for. The various broad category, that is the marks division that has been prescribed by the board, are as follows. You have to mention one confirmatory test for the anion that would carry 1.5 marks. There would be identification of group, that is group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 0 with pertinent group reagents that carries 1.5 marks again. And finally, the confirmatory test for the cation that we would be getting from the above group that carries 1 marks. So 1.5 plus 1.5 and 1, total is 4 marks for the analysis of the inorganic salt that consists of 1 cation and 1 anion. Now, when we are actually performing the experiment, there are few tricks or few things that has to be kept in mind when we are doing it. When we go for the anion analysis, we start with sodium carbonate extract preparation. Now, what is this? The sole purpose for this extract preparation is to convert our given salt into water-soluble sodium salt. Now, the question is, the council has said that we would be given soluble salts only. So, there is no need of making this extract. But for our safety and for the betterment of our work, we would suggest you that whenever you are doing the confirmatory test, particularly for the anion, go for this extract. Rather, you need to write the preparation of this extract as well in the answer script. So the purpose of making the sodium carbonate extract is to convert your salt into water-soluble sodium salt. Okay. Now, when we are preparing the sodium carbonate extract, we have to keep this in mind that the ratio has to be maintained as 1:3, where 1 ratio is for the salt and part 3 is for the sodium carbonate salt. That is, for your general knowledge, if you take half spatula of the given inorganic salt, then you have to take 1.5 spatula of the sodium carbonate straw salt that would be given to you in the laboratory. You mix the two of them and add around 25 to 30 ml of distilled water. Okay. So once this mixture is prepared, you need to boil this. Boil for 3 minutes. Now please be very careful. There's a difference between warming, heating and boiling. You need to boil this for around 3 minutes. If you give more, even better. But we suggest you boil this for around 3 minutes in a beaker where your salt would be converted into the corresponding sodium salt. Now, after you have boiled for 3 minutes, you allow it to cool. After you have boiled it, you allow it to cool and then filter the contents. And then you filter the contents. The filtrate that you would be getting, is your desired sodium carbonate extract. Further which you would be going for the confirmatory test for the anion. Right? It could be the nitrate test, the brown ring test, it could be the sulfate test, it could be the chloride test, it could be the acetate test. So this filtrate is what we would be needing next. Now this filtrate actually consists of excess sodium carbonate, so it would have carbon dioxide gas in it. So it is very, very essential. It is very essential to remove this excess CO2 from this extract. Now, when we are removing the carbon dioxide gas from this extract, we need to add dilute acid. Now when we are adding acid to this given extract, we have to be very careful with the choice of acid that you make. So this entire filtrate that you get, it is advisable you divide it into 3-4 contents, that is into 3-4 parts, and with each part you do the corresponding test for the various anion that you are getting as a preliminary test. I am sure you must be doing the preliminary test before you proceed with the confirmatory test. Preliminary test need not be written in the answer script. First and foremost, you should keep in your mind, these are the various broad categories that need to be written very well in your answer script. Preliminary test need not be written, okay? But you have to perform in order to be sure that what confirmatory test you would be doing next. Now, we were talking about the choice of acid. Suppose you are doing the brown ring test for nitrate, that is a brown ring test. Now, if you are wanting to do the test for nitrate, you would not acidify this extract with dilute HNO3. If you are already going to do the test for nitrate, why would you insert or why would you introduce nitrate from outside purposely, right? So we would be very careful that if you're going to do the confirmatory test for nitrate, do not add dilute HNO3. So the mineral acid to be chosen is either dilute HCl or you can use acetic acid. Similarly, if you keep this concept in your mind, if you have to do the test for chloride, you would not use dilute HCl. You would either use dilute nitric acid or acetic acid and so on. So the purpose of adding this acid is to remove the carbon dioxide from the filtrate. How would you know that it has been removed? As soon as you add the acid to the contents, you see effervescence. The effervescence is because of the CO2 gas. So once the effervescence stops coming, you add the acid and you see effervescence is coming out. There would be a point where the effervescence has stopped coming. That means your CO2 gas liberation has stopped. Now this is the final filtrate with which you would be going for the confirmatory test for the anion. Be very sure with it. Whatever the confirmatory test you do with the sodium carbonate extract for the anion. Be very sure sodium carbonate extract is only for the confirmatory test for the anion. For the cation, we need not do this, right? So once this anion is confirmed, we would be writing the confirmatory test with the experiment, with the observation and the inference. It has to be written very well in the answer script, and the proper reagents with the formula has to be mentioned. It carries 1.5 marks. Keep this in mind. This confirmatory test for the anion, one confirmatory test to be written. You may have 2, 3 which you have read it in your books, in your lab books, but there is one confirmatory test for which you would be awarded marks. Now, my anion is detected with the help of this sodium carbonate extract, correct? Now my anion is known. We just have one anion and one cation for our board practicals. Now we are left with the cation. When we do the cation or when we try to detect the cation in our inorganic sample, we start with the group. Okay. Now you will see in your question paper, you would be having a question which says, how was the original solution prepared? Before writing the group, the identification of the group and understanding in which group the cation lies, there would be a question that says, how is the original solution prepared? As I have told you, the council has instructed that it would be water soluble salt. So my answer would be the original solution is prepared by dissolving it in distilled water. Okay, so when we proceed for the cation, the original solution to be prepared is with distilled water, right? Now you start the group analysis. The group analysis is for which part? It is for the cationic part of the salt. Now, the groups have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 0. Always start with group 0. You should never miss group 0 because you never know that you have group 0, and once you start with group 1 and you end till group 6 and you get nothing. What did you miss? Group 0, which was very easy. So group 0 is simply take the salt, add dilute NaOH and heat. If you get the pungent smell, ammonium present. So group 0 needs to be written first, right? It is advisable to write group 0 first. Even if it is not present, write it and write in inference group 0 absent if it is not present. We move ahead. When we move ahead with our groups, the group reagents, please be very sure of the group reagents. The group reagents, it carries a whole lot of weightage, 1.5 marks. They give a lot of weightage to the group reagents. Yes. So, the group reagents for group 1, the original solution that we had prepared, the original solution has to be dissolved in dilute HCl. The original. So, I have written the group reagents for you people so that it would be easier to understand. For group 0, which we have already discussed, group 1, OS, as I had mentioned, the original solution, which is prepared by adding distilled water. So, to my original solution, we add dilute HCl. We see. If we get a precipitate, that means group 1 is present. That means if precipitate you get, PPT if you get, that means group 1 is present. But if no characteristic observation or no precipitate is found, that means group 1 is absent, right? So when you find that group 1 is absent, what do? We proceed with the second group. In the second group, to the same solution, pass H2S gas to it. Again, when you pass H2S gas, you again look for a precipitate. If you get a precipitate, well and good, that means group 2 is present. If you do not get a precipitate, that means group 2 is absent. Now, suppose your group 2 is present. It is oblivious. You have to write that group 1 is present. Absent. If you get group 2 present, it is mandatory to write that group 1 was absent. Right? If you do not write that group 1 was absent and you simply write that group 2 is present, you will not be awarded any marks. Please get this very clear. To get a particular group present, the previous groups has to be shown absent. Right? Now, suppose you have landed in group 2 and it is shown present. Do we write or do we perform the analysis for group 3, 4, 5, 6? It is optional. Optional in the sense you will not be awarded any marks for it. So why waste time? If you get group 2 present, we stop there. We do not write about group 3, 4, 5 and 6. We simply go for the confirmatory test for that particular group for which you have got the group 2 present. Is this clear? For any particular group to be present, the previous groups has to be shown absent and the following group after that group need not be written because we are not getting any marks for that, right? So the various groups that we have written is group 2. For group 2, the pertinent group reagent is H2S gas because the precipitate is in the form of a sulfide. If that is also absent, we go for group 3. How to do group 3? Since H2S gas is already present in the medium, we need to remove this. We need to boil this off. So first we add nitric acid and concentrated nitric acid and we boil the H2S whichever is already present. How much nitric acid? 3 to 4 drops because it's already concentrated. Concentrated nitric acid 3 to 4 drops. Boil it off. Then wait. Cool. You add pinch of ammonium chloride. What is the meaning of presence of ammonium chloride? Ammonium chloride has to be there from beforehand. So ammonium chloride, a pinch of ammonium chloride has to be added to the contents and excess of ammonium hydroxide to be added. If you get a precipitate, group 3 is present. If you do not get a precipitate, group 3 is absent, go for group 4. Now, the group 4 reagent is, again we add H2S gas to the above medium. That means ammonium hydroxide was already added in excess. So we pass hydrogen sulfide gas and we wait for the observation. If you get an observation, that means my group 4 is present and group 3 was absent. Suppose no observation, so group 4 is also absent. If group 4 is absent, similarly you go for group 5 and group 6. Now, when we are actually performing in the laboratory for our examinations, I would suggest what we have commonly seen whenever you do any group. For example, if you do group 1 and group 2, you take OS, dilute HCl, Group 1 analysis and group 2 analysis can go simultaneously. But when you go for group 3, the boiling of part of hydrogen sulfide by adding nitric acid and all that is a little tricky situation. That is why we suggest that if your group 1 and group 2 is absent, do not continue with the same filtrate. You take the original solution, okay, and then you add directly a pinch. You take the original solution, you directly add ammonium chloride, a pinch of ammonium chloride and excess of ammonium hydroxide to find out if group 3 is present or not. We are only doing this. This is for your safety, this is for your benefit in order to get group 3 properly. But when we are writing, we will write from group 0, then 1, 2, 3 like this. But when we are performing, we suggest that whenever you have to do for group 3, 4 and 5, start with the OS. Start with the OS and add the particular group reagents to find out if that particular group is present or not. Correct? So this group part is, I'm sure it must be clear to all of you. So the pertinent group reagents is very, very important to identify which group is actually present in my cation, right? Now, once we have understood the various the group in which a cation is lying, we go for the confirmatory test for that particular group. Various confirmatory tests have been given for the different cations which we've already studied. How many confirmatory tests to be written? Just one. There is only one confirmatory test that needs to be mentioned and it carries 1 marks. If you miss writing the confirmatory test, you will not be getting 1 marks, right? So, the confirmatory test for the anion and cation both are done. Now, the visiting examiner, what is he or she supposed to see? We need not show the observation that we get for the group analysis. What we have to show is only the confirmatory test. Whatever confirmatory test, you may be doing more than one confirmatory test, but you have to show only one confirmatory test for each cation and for the anion. The confirmatory test has to be shown to the visiting examiner. This is mandatory. And the titration reading that we have already discussed, that part is already there. So for this inorganic salt analysis, the confirmatory test needs to be shown. It has to be shown to the visiting examiner, and the very, very important part is the writing. The writing. These are the various marks division that I have just discussed with you, where you can focus, where you learn up well, and you know what is not to be missed out at all. Like the confirmatory test, the group reagents, the confirmatory test for the cation. These are the areas where you would be marked upon. So these points need not be missed at all. Now, one more thing that I would like to share with you is when we were discussing for the confirmatory test for the anion, it just came to my mind that suppose you are doing with a sodium carbonate extract, of course, when you are doing a confirmatory test for the chloride, right? So what is a confirmatory test for the chloride ion? You add AgNO3 solution. Now, when you add the silver nitrate solution, you get a curdy white PPT of AgCl. Now, this curdy white PPT of AgCl is soluble in ammonium hydroxide. This AgCl, the curdy white precipitate of silver chloride, is soluble in excess of NH4OH, needs to be written in observation. Just writing curdy white precipitate obtained would not fetch you full marks. You need to write that it is soluble in excess ammonium hydroxide. This needs to be kept in mind. Again, similarly for the sulfate. For the detection of the sulfate anion, what do you add? You add barium chloride solution to get a heavy white precipitate of BaSO4. So just writing a heavy white precipitate obtained would not fetch you full marks. What do you need to write? That it is insoluble. This white precipitate is insoluble in either dilute HCl or dilute nitric acid, any mineral acid. So this soluble part and insoluble part in excess of that mineral acid needs to be shown in order to get full marks. So you need not further ponder upon that why or where did you lose marks. These are the few areas, this inorganic salt analysis, right? So this ISC has made it very clear, the council has made it very clear. For this you get 4 marks. where the marks divisions are as follows. Just write it properly. You need not worry. Systematically, if you perform, you would surely get the test. Just remember the group reagents. For the cations and the anions, there are various probable chances of what is coming and not is coming. Learn the common ones, the cations and the anions, which are really common. It would be really helpful for you. Please do it well, and the points which has to be written down, your answer script is what is going to fetch you marks. How you perform, it is equally important, but the way you present the paper is extremely going to make a difference to what you scored, right? So that's all that we had to share from the qualitative inorganic analysis. I wish you all the really best. We hope to see you soon with further more videos. Do study well, stay safe, keep yourself safe, and study well. Thank you.